During my college days, I believe I was a freshman living in the dorms. The college was quite small, with around 2,000 students and just 5 buildings on campus. One day after my morning class, I returned to my dorm, had some free time, and did some homework before heading out for my final class of the day. Leaving my dorm, I walked across a quiet courtyard to the building where my class was held. It was still about 20 minutes before the class started, and hardly any students were outside. Upon reaching the building, I found the main entrance locked, which was strange. I tried other doors, but each one was locked. Unsure of what was happening, I decided to skip the class, as it wasn't the most exciting one. I turned and walked back to my dorm. As I turned, I noticed a guy running in the distance. He ran from behind another building, disappeared behind a bush, and later emerged, walking in my direction. I turned back, planning to go to my dorm and take a nap. Upon reaching my dorm, I sat down on my desk, and as I just turned on my computer, I heard someone trying to open the door. To my surprise, it was the same guy I had seen running earlier, trying to look at me through the peephole and knocking. After a while, the knocking stopped and the guy left. I felt very weird about the whole situation. Initially, I considered letting him in, thinking he might have lost his key, but a bad feeling stopped me. I turned away, feeling a bit bad, but I wasn't supposed to let someone in who didn't live there. I went upstairs, took a nap, and later noticed several police cars on campus with flashing lights. Checking my student email, I found notifications of a lockdown earlier in the day, explaining why the building doors were locked and classes were canceled. Surprisingly, I hadn't been aware of the lockdown until then. About 30 minutes later, the lockdown ended, and classes were called off for the rest of the day. It took a few days to learn that a guy from the area, not a college student, had made threats against the university. Someone from the college reported him, and when he showed up on campus, it went into lockdown. He tried to enter buildings and happened to be the same person I almost let into my dorm building. I'm really glad I didn't. This happened in the spring of 2016, when I was in my first year of high school. I was around 14 years old. It was during the time of the clown sightings craze that spread widely. This was all over social media, and if you were a teen or in school back then, you surely know what I'm talking about. It occurred on March 25th, 2016, during my last period of the day. I was in history class, and after finishing a Titanic assignment, I asked my teacher if I could use the restroom. She agreed, and I went to the one on the other side of the building, since the nearby one was being cleaned. As I walked down the hall, I saw a person in a clown costume. I thought it might be a prank, given the trend. Even though the costume looked realistic, it creeped me out. I nodded at the clown and entered the girls' restroom, not thinking much of it. While in the restroom, the PA system announced a lockdown. I felt a pit in my stomach, realizing it was because of the clown. I pulled up my pants, and as I looked up, I saw the clown's head peeking above the stall. I screamed, and as I rushed out, the person in the clown costume fell to the ground. I ran to my teacher's room asking her to unlock the door, but she couldn't. She told me to run and hide somewhere safe. I found an unlocked electrical room, and hearing a machine humming, thought it would be a less noticeable hiding spot. Later, I heard police entering the building yelling. Through a vent, I saw officers and SWAT guards surrounding the area. After about 10 minutes, they walked out with 2 clowns in handcuffs. One of them was the one I saw, and the other had a real machete. The clowns had been suspended for their behavior at my school. They claimed it was just for the trend and had no intention of harming anyone, but the police arrested them. I came out of the room, explained what happened, and went to the main office with a faculty member until my parents arrived. The 2 boys were expelled and served jail time as they were 18. After that, my parents moved me to another school, and I developed a fear of clowns, which took nearly half a year for the trend to die down. Thankfully, nothing like that happened again. I'm a teacher, And this happened a couple of years ago, during my 4th year at the high school where I still teach. I teach math and had 4 classes that semester. One day, about a month into the school year, I was teaching my first hour class when the phone in my classroom rang. I paused and answered it, learning that the school was going into lockdown, though I wasn't told why. After that, the announcement came over the school intercom, and some students in my class asked me why we were in lockdown. I didn't know, so I followed the lockdown procedures, turning off the lights and locking the doors. I instructed the students to the back of the classroom. There were 20 kids, and they all wanted to know why we were in a lockdown. I didn't have the answers. I went to my desk, sat down, and we waited. Minutes felt like forever. About 10 minutes later, my cell phone started vibrating on my desk. It was a number I didn't recognize. I debated whether to answer, thinking it might be related to the lockdown. I answered, and a man told me I was needed in the principal's office immediately. I asked why, but he said it would be discussed when I got there. Confused, I said I couldn't leave my class, but he insisted, then hung up. I saw my students looking at me, wondering what happened on the phone. One asked, and I told them the truth, that someone asked me to the principal's office and I didn't know why. I debated whether to go or not. I got up and walked over to the door, looking out the window into the hallway. It was empty, but I saw someone far to the left, barely in my sight. A man in all black with a ski mask. I quickly moved back, not wanting my students to know he was so close. Things were silent for a few minutes, and I got another call from the same number. I ignored it, but they called back. I turned off my phone. We waited in the classroom for almost an hour. Finally, I got a call that the lockdown was over, and there was an announcement over the intercom. Class was over, and I let the students out. When I learned more details, I couldn't believe it. The person in the ski mask was a former student of our high school, also a former student of mine, who I had failed. He came back to the school and called me on my cell phone. I'm not sure how he got my number, but he tried to get me out of my classroom. I'm not sure what he was planning, maybe to attack me. Luckily, he was spotted by a faculty member, prompting the lockdown. The police located and caught him, though he evaded them for a while. I still can't believe it, and it was one of the scariest moments of my life. During my freshman year of college, I found myself struggling with a chemistry class. The tables in the classroom were arranged in groups, and I ended up sitting next to a guy named Zach. He was a bit awkward, with an unkempt appearance and a patchy beard, but he seemed to excel in chemistry. Zach noticed that I was having a tough time in class, and he offered to help me out. He even went as far as doing my homework for me and letting me cheat off him during tests. Despite his odd demeanor, I appreciated his assistance, and we developed a cordial relationship. As the semester went on, Zach asked for my number so he could send me homework-related stuff. I didn't think much of it and gave it to him without hesitation. He continued to help me, and I never felt any threatening vibes from him. However, on the last day of class, Zach surprised me by asking if I wanted to go on a date with him. I was taken aback, as I had never considered him in that way. But since he had helped me maintain an A in the class, I felt obligated to let him down gently. I lied and told him I would be going to Miami for a couple of weeks and wouldn't be around. Zach immediately asked about seeing me when I got back, and I reluctantly agreed, hoping he would lose interest during my supposed absence. That night, I went out with my friends, and we joked about the situation. They suggested I go on the date with Zach just to be nice, but I brushed off the idea. Little did I know that decision would come back to haunt me. The next day, I woke up to multiple texts from Zach asking about my trip to Miami. I panicked and told him I was leaving that day. He seemed skeptical, but eventually accepted my excuse. Later that night, while out with my friends again, I received a text from Zach that sent chills down my spine. He accused me of lying to him and ignoring him now that I didn't need him anymore. I felt a sense of dread wash over me as I realized how creepy and obsessive he was becoming. Things took a terrifying turn when I arrived home to find Zach knocking on my door at 1 a.m. I was alone and scared, so I threatened to call my dad if he didn't leave. Thankfully, he backed off, but I couldn't shake the feeling of fear that lingered long after he was gone. The situation escalated when Zach sent me a long, disturbing text, expressing his hurt and anger at being used by me. He claimed to have noticed my interest in him and insisted that I owed him a date for all his help throughout the semester. I was horrified by his entitled attitude and immediately reached out to my family and friends for support. My dad even sent Zach a stern message and tried calling him multiple times, but Zach never responded. The next day, I went to the police station and informed them of the situation. They assured me that they would contact Zach and attempt to question him about his behavior. However, Zach seemed to vanish into thin air, and I never heard from him again. Although I never saw Zach on campus again, the experience left me shaken and wary. Dealing with an actual stalker was terrifying, and it made me realize the importance of trusting my instincts and setting boundaries with others. I went to college when I was much younger than most, because I skipped a couple of grades. My parents thought I needed more challenging studies, because my teachers and principal noticed that I was way smarter than others at the time. They suggested my parents to promote me to college directly. This story happened before spring break in my biology class. While our teacher talked about examining frogs, our principal, Mr. Hernandez, announced a lockdown over the loudspeaker. Teachers had to lock doors, and we had to go to the safest part of the room. Since our class didn't have a closet, we went to the back. The teacher turned off the lights, locked the door, and we waited quietly. After a few minutes, we heard the main doors open. I wasn't sure if it was the police, but it didn't seem like it. Soon we heard deranged screams down the hallway. It was unsettling, and the class was terrified. A girl's phone rang, making everyone even more worried. As the screams got closer, I realized it was a man with a deep voice. What he said was horrifying, and many of us were texting parents and calling 911. He went to every door, including ours, banging and making terrible threats. Luckily, our school had bulletproof doors, so we felt safer. Even though he tried hard, he couldn't get in. He punched through a small window, but my teacher forced his arm out. The man continued down the hall toward the main office, but was stopped by the police. After an hour, the principal gave the all clear and school ended early. Staff escorted us out safely. A week later, I learned he was being transported to a facility, but managed to escape, causing all the chaos. He was strong and off his meds. The driver was okay and no one was hurt when he entered the school. The school started doing lockdown drills as a precaution. I hope he gets the help he needs in the mental facility. It feels like a lifetime ago, but the memories of that day are still etched vividly in my mind, like scars from an old wound that refuses to fade. It was the last day of school, a day filled with excitement and anticipation for summer break. I was in the 4th grade, and little did I know, it would turn out to be one of the most terrifying days of my life. My routine was simple. After school, I waited for my mom to pick me up. She was always there, like clockwork, waiting to take me home. But that day was different. My friend Dennis and I had planned a play date to celebrate the end of the school year. Dennis wasn't in my class, but we had been friends since kindergarten. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school year, we lined up single file and made our way to the exit door. I waited eagerly for Dennis's dad to appear from the crowd of parents shuffling in and out of the parking lot. But instead, a man I didn't recognize approached me, waving and calling my name. He introduced himself as Dennis's uncle and said he was there to pick me up. Confusion clouded my mind. Dennis's dad was supposed to pick us up, not his uncle. But the man assured me that Dennis was already at his house, and I trusted him. We walked quickly through the crowd, the man's fast-paced chatter filling the air. He seemed jittery, his words tumbling out in a jumble as we made our way to his car. a dark red hatchback parked nearby. It felt strange, but I followed him without question. During the short drive, the man kept up his rapid-fire conversation, asking me questions and sharing stories from his own childhood. But something didn't feel right. We were driving longer than usual and the neighborhood looked unfamiliar. When we arrived at his house, I felt a knot form in my stomach. The curtains were drawn shut, casting the interior into darkness. As we entered, the man's demeanor changed. His friendly smile faltered, replaced by something sinister. He led me inside and locked the door behind us. The darkness enveloped us, broken only by the dim glow of a lamp in the corner. I asked about Dennis, but the man's response was vague and unsettling. Something wasn't right, and I could feel it in my bones. As the man disappeared into another room, leaving me alone in the dimly lit house, panic set in. I knew I had to escape, but the door was locked and I was trapped. My heart raced as I searched for a way out, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. In a stroke of luck, I found a phone in the kitchen and dialed 911, whispering a plea for help before hiding the phone under a towel. But my relief was short-lived when the man returned, his demeanor growing more aggressive as he realized I was onto him. He led me downstairs to a dark, empty basement, the air thick with fear and desperation. I felt a wave of terror wash over me as the door slammed shut behind us, trapping me in that suffocating darkness. For what felt like an eternity, I sat in that basement, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. I could hear the man moving around upstairs, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silence. But then a ray of hope, the sound of police banging on the door above. With renewed determination, I screamed and pounded on the door, desperate for someone to hear me. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door swung open, and I was free. As I emerged from that dark, suffocating basement, I was met with the blinding light of day and the comforting embrace of the police officers waiting outside. They took me to safety, away from the nightmare that had unfolded. In the days and weeks that followed, the truth came to light. The man who had kidnapped me was a work associate of Dennis's father, someone who had seized the opportunity to prey on innocent children. But despite the horror of that day, I emerged stronger than ever, determined not to let fear define me. And though the memories still haunt me, I refuse to let them hold me back. For I am a survivor, and nothing can dim the light that burns within me.